Hello and welcome to Winter Grace Senior Ministries. Welcome to our very first Ask the Experts panel ever. We are so happy that you are here with us today to talk about how we are going to support our aging loved ones, particularly maybe our spouse or our parents. We are joined today by three fantastic experts in our field and one who left some notes because she had an unexpected family event. We are joined today by Jen Gruber, life coach, Mary Hughes, daily money manager, and Ellen Perticone, senior placement advisor. Ladies, we are so happy you're here to join us today, and thank you so much. So we're going to start off with some introductions. Jen, if you could introduce yourself, please, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm a certified life coach. My specialty area is family relationships. And I've worked with a lot of clients who have family members entering a new phase of life, because that really can change the dynamics of our relationships. I love working with clients whose parents are aging, because it really is a special time that affords us an opportunity to bond with them in a different way than we have in the past. It can be tricky though. Sometimes what we believe our parents need is different than what they think they need. Sometimes they want and need more than we're able to give. Sometimes we have siblings who aren't necessarily on the same page as us, and that can really complicate things. So it can be overwhelming. My role as a coach is to create really a judgment-free space where I partner with clients to explore what they want their relationships to look like and what's getting in the way of that. And then together we define some specific goals for moving forward and create plans to achieve those goals. What I love about coaching is that there's absolutely no advice giving, because what works, what works for one person isn't necessarily going to be the right answer for anyone else. So I'm not there to tell my clients what to do. Instead, I partner with them and really help them to find solutions that they feel good about.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. Ellen, will you please give us a brief introduction to you as well, please?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Perticone. I own Senior Placement Navigators, and that is a service available to families when it is time for a transition. What I do is I partner with dozens and dozens of facilities and communities in Baltimore City and 5 counties. And I work with families both as an advocate and a navigator. And we work from soup to nuts throughout the entire process of searching for, identifying what is important, looking at all the things that are factors that go into a transition, a place that would work for their family member. And I just follow up after the person has moved in. These services, this business model, and there are other people who do this, there is typically no charge to the families for that. So that's something really nice that a lot of families don't realize.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ellen. Mary Hughes, will you please share with us about you?
Thank you, Debbie. I'm Mary Hughes, and I am a daily money manager with Peace of Mind Solutions. I work with older adults, their adult children, on their day-to-day finances, such as paying their bills or sorting their mail, or even just getting their tax organizer ready once a year. I am a financial problem solver, so I work with the team of trusted advisors helping to keep my clients organized. And as far as if you give examples, I work with powers of attorney, the executor of the estate, as well as the adult children to resolve things with their parents' affairs. And I have to say that no one should be using their dining room table as a filing cabinet. If you call me, I will help you turn your pile management into file management.
It sounds good to me. And then, as I mentioned, we had a fourth professional who was going to be with us, and that's Allison Stanton. She's a social worker and aging life care manager. Allison had to be away unexpectedly today, so I have her introduction, and I have the privilege of sharing about Allison. She is a social worker and aging life care manager with Stanton Aging Solutions in Howard County. She has 24 years of experience working with older adult population and their families, navigating the healthcare system and finding solutions. She is an aging life care expert and is extremely knowledgeable about state and federal regulations and resources. Allison completes comprehensive assessments and helps develop a plan of care to optimize well-being and meet individual life goals. Whether the goals are to age in place, move to a higher level of care, or help in a time of crisis, Allison has the skills and expertise to help find solutions and be your partner in care. And Allison also sent notes, what we're going to be getting to in a few moments. Winter Grace Senior Ministries is a nonprofit that we started 3 years ago to help connect to, our mission is to empower and enrich the lives of older adults through Christian connections, connecting people, ideas, and resources. That's our long mission statement. But one of the ways we are doing this is through this resource fair and bringing you into contact with experts in various services that really are important for older adults and their loved ones to know about. So this panel got started as a result of thinking about, if we're blessed enough to have our parents and other loved ones live to older ages, and it is indeed a blessing, we also might, along with that comes challenges or possibility of challenges, and they can be as a result of an event like a stroke or a fall or an accident, or it can be a gradual situation where the safety and independence of our older loved one needs to be addressed. So we invited Ellen, Mary, and Jen and Allison to join us to talk about that and answer questions that you might have. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about is, okay, we're talking about what happens during this change in level of independence. And first question was, what are the signs we're going to look for? And that's where I have Allison's notes for that as well. So these are warning signs that we need to take heed of and pay attention to. And there are 6 of them. The first one is medication issues. If you're seeing pills on the floor when you are visiting, pill boxes not refilled when they should be, simply forgetting to take them, changes in appearance, when someone's normally dressed to the nines and all of a sudden the same clothes are repeatedly worn or they appear disheveled and may have poor hygiene, memory changes and forgetfulness. Short-term memory loss is an example of this, repeating the same thing over and over, and the problem of finding words. Or they may have decreased interests. Becoming withdrawn and losing interest is a clue that something is going on, maybe depression or masking a decline that is going on, but they don't want anyone to know. Issue number 5 is issue with bill paying. Mail starts to pile up, bills are not getting paid, you're having trouble managing the checkbook when this was never an issue before. And then the 6th one, and these are more obvious changes, a decline in physical functioning, falls, chronic illness that's progressing and needs to be addressed, recurrent hospitalizations, and other things like this. So these are 6 tips that 6 signs that Allison says we need to look out for. And I'm going to say one of those things, memory changes and forgetfulness, might be something I need to be concerned about, because we were going to go around and give these ladies more time if they would like to share with more details of how you can work with them. And yeah, like I said, this is our first seminar, and I'm nervous. I'm just going to put that out there. So before we go on to our questions, would you all like to add? And I'm sorry, I apologize. This is me being nervous. I think we are going to go on to our next question. Is that right?
Well, I can add something to what you shared, because I think that
Please do.
The answer was great. The answer was great. A couple things that I remember from my own family, in addition to that, is the vehicle. If there's been any dents in the car, that's a real good sign. If there's any accidents that your loved one might share with you, like, I don't know where that person came from, they came like a bat out of you know where, those are signs that something might be less than it used to be. And so it's about really paying close attention to a lot of areas of the senior's life.
Jen or Mary, do you have additional signs that you'd like to share?
It kind of goes along with the medication changes. If your parents aren't paying their bills on time, or they're getting late notices, that's another sign of just that not able to manage their affairs like they once were. And it's financial bills and that sort of thing is one of the first signs you actually can see any type of dementia or memory issues that might, become more apparent. Sometimes they're really good at hiding it, but if the electricity is turned off, you can't hide that.
That is very true.
I think for me, my dad had dementia, and some of the first signs that I noticed were just in our phone calls, things that he wasn't keeping track of. And some of that is normal, but pretty significant things like not remembering that someone had passed away, that kind of clued me in. Then when I was at his house, I noticed some kind of detailed notes that he kept by the phone where he was really using a lot of tools that he had created to help himself keep track of things. But when I noticed that that he needed to rely on those, that was kind of a tip off to me.
Absolutely. So we start to see these signs, and then before we see we know what these signs are now, and we probably have a lot of experience with them. Everyone does. What can we do once we first start seeing these signs, or what could we even do before we see these signs to help our older loved ones be prepared? Mary, how can we address that?
So now we've seen the signs, now what?
Exactly.
Having these conversations with our parents, it's a very difficult conversation, because we have been the adult child, but we've been the child all their lives, and they're the ones who've always kind of been our role models. But we need to find out like what our parents' plans and wishes are. And it's best to start this before there's a crisis. During a crisis is no time to be starting to talk about finances. So in order to come up with a plan, we need to find out certain information so that we can make decisions help our parents making these decisions. And when you have the information, and if you can come up with a plan, your parents are going to be in a better position for choice as well as options that they can choose from. When there's a crisis, you start limiting those options. So where do we start? Well, the first question you should be asking is who would manage my parents' health and financial affairs if they were to become incapacitated? So some of this information is outlaid in a state documents that your parents might already have. They might have a will, they might already have a power of attorney, but do they have a healthcare, like advance directive? That's very helpful to have in place so that their wishes if they do end up in the hospital, and God forbid they might need you guys to be making decisions on their behalf on what their wants and needs are. If they have these documents, it might be a good idea to update them if they're open to that. And if they don't have the documents, it might be a good idea to actually get some of these documents in place for your parents. It's when you begin this, it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. You're kind of putting all the pieces together. So it's not going to be just one conversation. You're going to have to keep going back on multiple occasions to try and find the information required to get these pieces in place so that you can make better plans. So on that note of the jigsaw puzzle, the next question you should be asking is, do my parents have enough money? And so you're going to start making lists of their assets, making lists of their debts, all of their income sources. Do they get Social Security? Do they get a pension? How much do they have to live on a monthly basis? And then while you're making these lists of assets, don't forget about the life insurance. Do they have a life insurance policy? Do you know where the policy is located? What about long-term care insurance? Do they have long-term care? Aging in place is very expensive, and long-term care can go a long way in helping the costs of hiring additional aides or being moved into, an assisted living or a nursing care facility. I don't know whether many people realize, but Medicare is not long-term care insurance. Medicare doesn't pay for this. Medicare only covers hospitalizations and medical for our seniors and older adults. So now that you've kind of got a list of all their assets and all their income sources, the next thing you need to look at is where do I find, other information of what their monthly expenses are. So such as, this is the keys to the kingdom, I call it. This is their, how bills are paid, when they're paid, which bills. Knowing this information can go a long way. And then if you need to get access to their computer or their password, do you have the passwords? This is very important information to have, with a lot of bills being done electronically. If someone doesn't have the password to someone's email or even the computer, it causes a lot of, you have to recreate almost like the crime scene in order to find this information out. Mm-hmm. And a safety deposit box. Do your parents have a safety deposit box? There could be important documents in that safety deposit box. You need to know where the key is, which bank it is. There was one story of someone who had the safety deposit key, but they didn't know what bank it was. So that was not going to help them on finding the information and accessing that box. And then also key information is having your parents' key contacts, their doctors, their attorney, their CPA, all the trusted advisors. Having a list of those important people can also help you gather more information. So, I mean, this is going to take multiple conversations with your parents, and you can probably try lead in to the conversation such as, hey, I just got my electric bill on auto pay. How do you pay your electric bill? I mean, it could be as simple as those conversations. When you start these conversations, you want to really approach your parents with compassion, that you're there to help them remain independent. You do not want to take over. That is not the job. You don't want to take over their life. That is not where you're gonna meet a lot of resistance if you do that. So in summary, if you get their list of assets, their list of bills and expenses, you'll be in a good position to help them with the decision going forward on what is the next step for them.
Thanks, Mary. We talk about, you mentioned aging in place, and that is a goal of many people. It's something to aspire to, but sometimes we find out that that's just not a realistic situation for us to remain in. Ellen, can you please share with us how we go about finding those options and what
Sure.
you do there?
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, I can. And one other piece I'd like to add about the previous question, because starting the conversation can be awkward. Mm-hmm. One way to look at it, and one approach to take with either parents, loved one, doesn't matter who it is first for the other family member to really understand what power of attorney is and what it isn't, what advance directive is and what it isn't. And mm-hmm. then one approach would be to say to the loved one, the senior, hey, I'm getting this for me, because if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, my family might not know what's what, and start the conversation that way. That can also start the conversation of, do you know what this means? Do you know what it doesn't mean? Do you have one? Gee, I might get hit by a bus. I need to be prepared. And then that could be a natural segue. A lot of times the seniors feel defensive, like, I'm not losing it. What do you mean? Why do you want all this information? And Mary did say, you do need to be cognizant of that. But back to the question at hand about senior living options that are not at home. Sometimes a senior is either in the hospital or coming from a rehab, and it has been recommended by the medical professionals and or the social worker that living at home anymore is not a safe option. And this is really, really about safety. Or sometimes the senior is living at home and it's not safe. And some key things are, the first thing that most seniors need help with, if nothing else, is medication management. That is so key, because if they get their medications mixed up or forget they took them and take them twice, it could have a lot of problems. So medication management. And the other is falls. Any falls within 6-month time frame that's not okay, because if they've fallen once, they're probably going to fall some more. And really don't want to have that happen. So when a family is thinking that this is not safe anymore, and how does this work? What are my options and how does this work? Someone like a navigator, like myself, someone who does placements, we're really experts in this. I'm live, hands-on, boots on the ground, so to speak, and you want someone who's not an online aggregator who doesn't even know these places, but someone local who has been to these places, has relationships with the places, knows the ins and outs, and that can really guide you. 3 factors that come into place that are held on the first conversation would be, what are the preferred locations? You know, the wider the net, the more options you have, but there might be reasons why in between certain siblings or near a certain area is important. Another thing is health and health history. Moving over and over again is not optimum. So you want to try to find a place that a person could age in place in and don't have to continually move. So knowing their history and knowing where they are, part of that comes from documentation from the medical professional and conversations with the family. And the third thing is finances. Big thing. And it's a matter of looking at what there is and what there isn't and what other options could be tapped into, and to see, okay, what could work for the reasonable future. We don't have a crystal ball knowing everything that's going to happen, but we can really look at it realistically and not look just 1 or 2 years down the road. It's really ideal to say, okay, for several years, is it sustainable? If it's not, well, what is plan B? And someone to walk you through that and help you navigate that and plan is really a big piece of it. Absolutely. And what I will say is this. Most people, they do not know a lot about senior living. They don't kick tires in this field. You just don't take your day off and say, oh, let's go visit assisted livings and see what they're like. That doesn't happen.
It does not happen.
It just doesn't. Maybe if you're buying a house, that'll happen. That's fun. Or even shopping for a car, you want to test drive a few new models. But in senior living, it doesn't happen. And so that's one of the reasons why a navigator can really be an asset and part of your team.
Alan, that is such a great point about not going around and looking ahead of time. I know when it became apparent that my dad needed more support than we could give him at home, my sister and I visited about 10 places in a week, and it was mind numbing. It was exhausting. Yes. And so to have someone who has already done all that ahead of time and knows the ins and outs of each of the places, it's incredibly valuable. And so I think we've either all experience this professionally, and also personally, and it is draining and stressful and exhausting, and can cause a lot of stress. And Jen, that's where we look to folks like you to help us guide us, and how can we best take care of our parents and best take care of ourselves, and have relationships sustain that as well.
Yeah. So we really do want to just preserve our relationships with our parents. We want as close and as fulfilling a connection with them as we can have, and we want their lives to be fulfilling. And in order to do that, taking care of ourselves really is important. So when we talk about self-care, that's really anything that we deliberately do to take care of our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. It's anything that kind of refuels us and gives us a chance to recharge. Supporting our parents can be really exhausting and overwhelming. And so often I hear clients say, I feel like I just need to breathe. So finding a way to give yourself the time and space to do that is really important. But it's tough. It feels like, taking care of ourselves feels like a low priority. A lot of times it feels like just a luxury that we don't have time for. We oftentimes have, our own kids and jobs and homes and responsibilities and spouses or partners and our parents. And we really want to be there for everyone else and feel like that should be our top priority. But in reality, if we're not filling our own tanks first, that it leaves us with very little to give to the people around us. It's like you hear when you get on an airplane, if you're traveling with a small child, put on your own oxygen mask first and then take care of them. So it's the same idea, considering our own needs feels selfish, but in reality, it's a necessity if we want to give the best of ourselves to the people we love. So the number one, I think, most important thing we can do in caring for ourselves is to really recognize and accept whatever it is that we're feeling. And it's just so important to realize that there's no wrong way to feel. When we're helping our parents, we may feel guilty or worried or frustrated or resentful or sad. We may feel hopeful or grateful. It's usually a combination of so many different things, and all of that is completely normal. A lot of times we feel like we need to just put on a brave smile and power through, but when instead we're able to kind of step back and recognize what we're feeling and accept that, by telling ourselves, okay, well, of course I'm feeling this way, then the kindness that we're showing to ourselves really brings some calmness to our thoughts. And just by being compassionate with ourselves, it kind of shifts us into a more positive mind frame, and that really impacts how we show up for the people around us. So beyond that, self-care is going to look really different from one person to another. So it's important that you check in with yourself to really think about what makes you feel refreshed, whether it's getting together with a friend for coffee or going for a walk, watching a funny movie, taking a bath. It could be as simple as just like lighting a special, nicely scented candle or something. It doesn't have to be something really elaborate or expensive or time consuming. It's really about just taking a moment to just put yourself first. We sometimes notice that what rejuvenates us kind of changes from day to day, depending on what we're dealing with. Some days getting together with a friend may be exactly what we need. And then on another day, the idea of talking to another person just feels totally exhausting. So again, it's just important to check in with yourself to just be aware of what you need so that you really can make choices that nourish you. It's also so important to remember that you don't have to do it all alone. If you're able to find ways to let go of some of the things that you're dealing with by, finding someone else to help with the day-to-day bills or to help with home care or to, help explore options with you so that you don't have to do all the research on your own. And just, there's so much support out there, and utilizing that really is a great way of honoring your own needs.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen.
I'd like to add something to what Jen said, because one of the main things that when I work with families, there's sometimes there's guilt with the other family members, and just know that do not make promises that you don't know that you can keep. So if someone wanted you to promise, don't ever put me in a blah, 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 you can say, I will promise I will be there for you. I will promise I will care for you and do the best I can with whatever the situation is. If those are your wishes, I will honor them the best I can. But don't make promises that you'll feel bad about later, because we can't predict the future. And you want to do what's best for your loved one. And in addition, I would just like to underscore what Jen said about having other people help. And I referred a family to Mary for the money manager when we found out that grandpa was putting the checks under the couch. And I said, oh my gosh, we need a money manager. And I educated the family on what that meant. And the beauty of that is that it takes the children or spouse, anybody, out of the role of fussing and aggravating with the person about these mundane tasks, puts it on the plate of somebody else who they don't know and they're not going to fuss with like that. And then you're left to do things that you want to do with your loved one that are pleasant, and not have that get into that power struggle. That is really a big advantage for both. That's really what Jen was talking about as well. And there are lots of resources. The other resources out there, there are a lot of medical resources, Alzheimer's Association, Parkinson's Foundation. I can't tell you how many resources are out there that are available for education. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, Alan, you just hit on a point which really is a lot of the foundation of why Winter Grace Senior Ministries even exists. I mentioned caring for my dad, and we were at a point with him that we didn't know where we were supposed to turn, and we didn't know what questions we were supposed to ask, and felt called to develop something that would be a source of information for people who were in that position. This is a collection of resources where we can go for help. So that really, not knowing what we don't know is a big challenge when we are put into a situation that might be a crisis. And so it's great to know that there are professionals out there. Now we have, really glad we have 3 guests on our call, and I do have a few questions that came in from people that let me know they weren't going to be able to be here, but had questions they wanted to ask. But I'd very much like to, either our guests can put their questions in the chat or even unmute themselves and ask their question. That would be great. While you all are thinking over questions, I will ask one that our team here can field. And we talked a little bit about this, but this is about how to start having that difficult conversation. And one was one of Allison's points that she had shared ahead of time was that when your family member's disheveled, and that's something new. I mean, not all of us dress to the 9s every day, or even to the 5s, if that's not even an expression. But if you notice a change in someone's appearance, how do you ladies have suggestions for how you can broach a difficult subject like that? Any thoughts?
The question was about appearance?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Well, what I would say is that something like that, a lot of times with older folks, and this doesn't necessarily happen, it's not part of the normal aging process, but there's a lot of depression. And, depression is something that it's not a one-day thing. So keep track of that and see, how do they look? Are their clothes dirty? Maybe they need help with laundry. Maybe bending over to get the laundry and sorting it and all that is just really physically more difficult. A lot of laundry rooms are not well lit. They're trip hazards right there. The whole room is a trip hazard, at least, well, in my house it is. but physically it might be difficult to do laundry. So that would be, do a little spy work and recon and see. You might want to try and say, gee, Mom, let me take you out to lunch, on Friday. How does that sound? Or to another family member and see, say, would you like to go shopping? How's it, do you need help with laundry? Is that difficult? Can I throw something in for you while I'm here? Mm-hmm. And see if you can start the conversation in a way. The key, I think one of the key things is not to, even though we want the answers, we have to be really sensitive of how we place the answers, how we put Absolutely. It out there. Because we really want to come from a place of helping and love. What I recognized with my own mother, and it was hard, it's very hard when you're emotionally involved because my mother was so capable her entire life. She was an RN from New York City. And I saw her decline at the end, and it was sad for me, but I was also concerned. And it's hard to really tease that apart and say, how can I approach this without putting this person on the defensive, but be the loving help that I want to be. So sometimes we just step back and think before we say anything, but you want to come across as being loving and being helpful and not judgmental.
And that absolutely, and that leads into another one of those difficult conversations is about driving. My mother gave up her keys voluntarily after she had a stroke, from which she recovered completely from. but she made the decision she did not want to drive again just in case. But my dad, on the other hand, was a little bit more reluctant to give up those keys. I was wondering if you have any suggestions for that conversation. Maybe, Jen, do you have any insight into that one?
It's a really tough one. You know, like Ellen said, you really want to approach these conversations gently and from a place of love, and you don't want to make your parent or whoever you're talking with defensive. But if you feel like there's a safety concern there, it gets a little more complicated. It's a tough conversation to have, for sure. Ellen, do you have specific?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, because if you look at it from the senior's perspective, for most seniors who are living independently, loss of driving is a bigger trauma than moving into a community, you know, assisted living or a place like that. So from the senior's perspective, they're thinking, what? I can't drive? That means I lost my independence, all of it. So before the conversation is started, and there is concern, and maybe it's valid, and maybe somebody's not driving at night anymore because they know it's not safe. Maybe they say, oh, I just go to the store on the corner. Okay, so before the conversation is brought up, what if the loved one explored other options? In different counties, there's different ride resources, and they're available. In Howard County, there's Neighbor Ride, and there's some kind of governmental driving resource in most areas. So if the other person did a little research and to see, okay, what's possible? You know, is there a senior version of Lyft? Is there, and not that I'm advocating any of these other companies, but do a little research and see, because from the senior's perspective, it's like they're cut off. So is there someone that there's a family friend they can hire, maybe. See if you can have alternatives, and even try some of those alternatives before the keys are removed. At least that's how I would think that someone who's independent, for the most part, and most cognitively there, but just not safe, so they don't feel cut off. That might be a softer, easier approach.
Well, and from a financial point of view, if your older parent caused a horrendous accident, the insurance liability on their shoulders would be massive. So if you think about the consequences of them staying on the road, maybe you can approach it from that point of view too.
Mary, I'm thinking this next question might be really, well, in all of your areas, but this one is kind of talking about planning, I think, a little bit. And the question is, my mom is in great shape and is caring for my dad who has dementia and won't be able to leave independently. I'm worried, what would we do if something were to happen to my mom? Is there anything I should do to prepare for that possibility?
I mean, this is, caring for the caregiver is so difficult when they're in these situations. I mean, having the plan of what would happen to your mother, even just respite so that she can get a break from caring for your father. What are the financial resources? Is there long-term care insurance? I mean, it's just how you're going to pay for caring for the caregiver, maybe even having an aide come in. They can afford it a few hours of the day just to take over some of those responsibilities. It's one of these things where if you know what their expenses, their monthly expenses are, then you're in a better position to make these decisions, or even just knowing what their income is every month, what they get in, then they can make these decisions, hiring an aide just to help out with, even just having helping them bathe their father. So
that's really good point.
Another idea is this, and Mary's thoughts are all excellent. If you took a step back and said, okay, what does the paperwork look like? So if the husband has dementia and the wife is the caregiver, and the wife is the only one who's the power of attorney, and if something happened to her. So power of attorney is great. In that situation, an alternate should be named, so that if something happened to the wife, child A or B steps in. Same thing with spouses. If they're both aging and they're each other's power of attorney, without an alternative, not a great idea. So when we say update your records, that means that if something happened to one of them, this is the other person that could step in. And that's a really important thing. And that's a starting point, because something could happen to the mom, the wife, if she was not available to take care of the husband, cognitively and physically. So that's a starting
Absolutely.
point.
And I do want to mention that on Wednesday at noon, October 7th, yes, October 7th, Wednesday at noon, we are going to have another Ask the Experts panel. And on that panel is a financial advisor, an elder care attorney, and a physical therapist, personal trainer. So I will be able to address a lot of these particulars on Wednesday at noon as well. We have Jan shared in the chat, one of the things that swayed my mother to stop driving was how much money she would save by not paying car insurance, gas, and maintenance. She could pay for a lot of cab rides with the savings. And that is such an excellent point, especially hopefully, you know, if your parents have a frugal mind to begin with, that's something that would be fulfilling. So that's a really good point.
I heard someone this week who deceived her father, saying, "We're moving to New York. You don't need a car." And that's how she got his car away from him.
And he didn't understand that he wasn't moving, so he didn't, yeah.
Well, I think at that point it was one of these things. I think she did move him to New York because that's where she was. But she's like, you're in New York, you don't need a car, so, you know.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I know, and we talked about appearance before, and these, you know, these changes and signs. And one of the things my mom, I said she happily gave up driving. She was good with that. But she did tell me if she ever stopped using her lipstick, that would be when I would need to be concerned about her. So, you know, different older adults have different levels of awareness and different priorities. And those are signs to look for too, as far as a change in priorities or, you know, something that's just out of character. And I will say that 3 days before she passed, when I did see her the last time, she had her lipstick on. She looked beautiful. And that was just 3 days before she passed. So these are all great conversations. They're hard conversations to have. And if we try to come from them in a place of love and support and encouragement, and understand that our parents, even if they don't receive our intentions the way we hope that they do, we can still keep on being loving and supportive and encouraging, and they will see that too. So, ladies, I just thank you so much for being a part of this today, being a part of the event. There's contact information for each of these ladies below this video. When I'll upload the recording of this video to the website, there's information below, and there's some documents to download as well. And I just thank you all so much, and I thank you, our guests, for coming. Please come back on Wednesday to meet our lawyer, our financial planner, and our personal trainer. So, hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Debbie,
Bye.
thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.